Good evening, everybody. Today is Tuesday, February 16th, 2021, and this is a Moscow City regular council meeting. Was that you down there, Gina?
That was me, sir.
Art?
Sorry.
Good evening. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Art. With that, we will. First item on the agenda is the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Art and a second by Sandra to approve the consent agenda. Ann, are you up there? I see you now. I'll go to you first, Ann.
Aye.
Okay, Randy. Maureen. Gina.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
And Art.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 2, which is mayor's,
New crew in the backs.
mayor's appointments. Where's that vibe coming from?
Got feedback from one of the microphones. I'll get it fixed sooner or later, I'm sure.
Okay, mayor's appointments, there is none this evening.
Yes.
I think so far we're okay. Might be your guys'.
Shut them off. My shut off.
Oh, okay. Oh, we get feedback somewhere from somebody. This will fix it for us.
Oh, there we go.
Being at a concert during a sound check.
Can we make sure everybody who is on the call is muted when they aren't speaking?
Okay. Do we have a noise? Can you guys hear me okay out there in the audience? Okay, thank you. Mayor's appointments, I have none this evening. Public comment, this is a time that we let folks get a chance to come up and say what's on their mind with us and take 3 minutes. However, if you're here for several of the items, we got item number 4, which is property owner tenant utility billing. You will have time to testify during that section when I bring that up, as well as the request for the police ice rink for Hamilton funds. Anybody that wants to speak on that will have time at that time as well. So if you're here to speak on either one of those issues, please do not have public comment. Otherwise, if you'd like to come up and address us, come on up, state your name, tell us what's on your mind. We'll give you 3 minutes. You're making it easy on me this evening. Okay, well, with that, Gary, we're going to go in right into item number 4, which is property owner tenant utility billing. We've got Gary Reedner here this evening. We also have Sarah Banks out there on virtual land with us.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now that we've got the technology wrangled a little bit, I'm here to present on the property owner tenant building process change being proposed by staff. And this was sent through administrative committee a week ago. It is a little faster than we would have originally liked to present it, mainly because we are facing a software changeover of our billing software. We use Springbrook software at this point, and the cutover is taking place even today over to BSNA, which will be our new utility billing software and city financial software. That software cutover will require everyone who has an account with the city to change that account. So it seems the perfect time to talk about property owner utility billing, property owner tenant utility billing, which has been in discussion for many years. You probably see Dan Schoenberg out in the audience. He was part of a group that when this was last brought before City Council in 2008. So what's old is new again, so we'll go through it. I'm going to go ahead and shut down this light so that we can see a little clearer on the screen. As you indicated, Your Honor, Sarah is on the call. So if there are particulars about the actual process, the physical process that is used for utility billing, both she and Sherry Wynn, our utility billing clerk, are available. So as far as background, each month the City of Moscow sends out approximately 6,343 utility bills. Our city code states that utility bills, property owners are responsible for utility bills for utilities that are used on the property. The Supreme Court has indicated that cities have the ability to make property owners liable for those utility bills, but there's something that needs to be done beyond just passing of an ordinance. That's called privity of contract, and we'll go into that here in just a moment, what that means and what the requirement is. So first, Moscow City Code Title 5, Chapter 4, Section 4 states clearly, and this code has been in place since before I came to the city in 1991, that all water charges shall be the ultimate responsibility of the property owner, provided that a non-property owner or tenant may pay said water charges. And that is a typical utility billing code section. Further, in that same code, all water charges shall be the responsibility of the owner of the property which receives the water. Then again, the city is authorized to receive payment from either the property owner or tenant or agent of the property owner. Agent of the property owner would be a situation where you have a management company or someone who is managing the property for the property owner. And lastly, the final section of that chapter essentially says that the city can recommend rules and make regulations to enforce the provisions of the code. So once the council approves those, the code can be implemented. All of these years, as I indicated, this code hasn't really changed as far as who is responsible for utility bills. However, the practice has never been in line with the code. So, 1989, there was a case called Grangeville versus Haskin. That's City of Grangeville v. Haskin. And essentially, it was a case where the city sued a property owner to recover utility bill charges that were incurred by the property when the property was occupied by a tenant. So essentially, what the issue was before the court, whether the city, by use or passage or adoption of an ordinance, can impose liability on the owner of the property for charges incurred by a tenant living in the property. Essentially, the court said that the city had no statutory authorization to impose a lien on the property or to collect the charges from the owner. Statutory, of course, meaning state code. However, they did indicate that the city was within its rights to, by ordinance, make it the liability of the property owner. However, there was no contract for services between the property owner and the city, and because the city code imposed it, it was implied that the property owner was responsible for the ultimate utility bill. Well, as it turned out, essentially what the Supreme Court said, and I have to say that there was a fairly strong dissent in the case itself, said that if the city wanted to impose that regulation, then the city must have privity of contract. All privity of contract means is you have to have an agreement between the property owner and the city where the owner requests the service to be provided to the property that the owner owns, that the owner acknowledge the responsibility, and what would happen if the bill was not paid, meaning utility services cut off, and then an action to recover those utility bills from the property owner, regardless of who used the services, whether it's a tenant or an owner of the property. So, as we indicated, our code allows for, or actually dictates that the property owner is ultimately responsible. However, for the past it's probably closer to 40 plus years now, utility billing has sent the bill to the tenant when the tenant requests it. So the tenant usually comes in, requests service, and the bill is then sent to the tenant. Obviously, this is a preferred method for the owner and most property management companies because it takes them totally out of the loop. And even though the code says that the property owner is ultimately responsible, we do not have the tool without that privity of contract to enforce the city code. So what happens is there are a bunch of steps that happen as we try to collect a delinquent bill. Okay, if there is a bill that is delinquent, it's eventually turned over to a collection agency. After the final bill and the past due notice, the account is then turned to collections. The account's monitored while in collection and the balance written off after 18 months of collection. So the additional steps take more time, add costs, and the city loses, if it is a successful collection, the city loses 40% of the past due bill because that's the fee of the collection agency. So what's the upshot of this? What is the cost to the city or the ratepayers? So the annual cost to the city for these uncollectible bills for non-owner occupied or leased and rental properties is approximately $10,250 per year on the average. So that is even 3 times that amount, however, is taken up in staff time when you talk about the issues that are related to that property owner and tenant utility billing, delinquent accounts, shut-offs, and collection efforts is approximately $31,000 per year in staff time for that process. Now what happens is that loss, that cost, is spread across all utility bill customers as it's taken into account as an uncollectible or an added expense of the utility. So infinitesimal as it may be, everybody shares in the cost of uncollectibles and additional staff time, every ratepayer that is. In addition, there are times when finance and utility billing acts as a buffer regarding misinterpretations between property owners and tenants. You know, when did someone move in? When did someone move out? Who gets to set up the account? Who terminates the account? Who's responsible for the outstanding balance? When water is shut off, who's responsible for paying the balance so the new tenants have active utilities? Leak balances. If someone comes in and they have a leak on the property that is not written off because it's on the tenant's, or excuse me, the property owner's side of the meter, then the question is who's responsible for that? So, I mean, these are just questions that go on. There's can be misunderstandings between property owners and tenants. And if it isn't resolved under City of Grangeville v. Haskin, we either collect it by means of pursuing the tenant or it's written off. So not exactly the best situation for the utility. So you look at time and cost breakdown. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this, except to say that service requests, so final billing requests, 75% of those service requests are attributed to customers who are renting or tenants. So you can see the cost over here, 267 hours per year. For deposits, same thing. So just shows exactly what the impact is as far as time spent dealing with deposits as well. Past due accounts, time related to tenants, approximately 70%, is about 50.4 hours per year, or a little over a working week, 1.25 working weeks. Shutoffs, 59% of all shutoffs, as you can see here, this is the tenant column and the owner column. So 59% of all shutoffs were due because of tenant accounts. Now, that is not to say that owners, as you can see, 41% of owner-occupied properties were also shut off. So you're not going to get rid of everything, but you will reduce significantly the amount of staff time that's spent for shutoffs as well. So time-related tenants of 59%, 247.8 hours per year. Bad debt, 94% of the total bad debt is related to tenants. If you have an owner-occupied residence and there is a collection action, or the ultimate authority is to use the shut-off power in order to encourage the property owner to pay the utilities, which works, as you can see, a fairly less than 6% of bad debts go with owner-occupied properties. So the time and cost summary we've already talked about comes out to be $10,253 on the average for bad debt, and then about $31,000 of staff time. So that's just a more detailed calculation of that. So Jen, for some reason, thought she needed to put this on here, mainly because I wanted to talk about what, even though it was a fast process, significant community outreach was done in the last week. Personal mailings to 33 property management companies and property owners, and all this information was given to us by the finance department, utility billing, who sends bills out every month to these folks. Social media posts, press release, and this article that was kindly done by Garrett at the Daily News, which informed people what was going on. And the article explained the process, explained what the changes were. They had some good comments from Sarah regarding the process from finance perspective. So we did get good exposure. So what we're looking for today is we're seeking City Council approval of the draft resolution that you have in your packets that adopts changes to the property owner tenant billing process. The change will affect all 6343 account holders. They will have to reestablish their accounts with the city under the new software. And we have processes in place to make it easy for the property owner to execute the agreement as required under City of Grangeville v. Haskin. So, just explaining, this is the BS&A go live date that talks about what will happen as far as putting this out, how that cutover will take place. So from a process standpoint, we feel that we've got it covered. It's coming together pretty smoothly, actually. We have the process in place, and I'm prepared to answer any questions the council may have. Again, Sarah has the answers regarding the actual process, but and I know you're going to take public comment.
Yes,
right?
I am. I do have a question on you. 6,343 of these bills will have to be changed. Is that correct?
Utility billing accounts.
So 6,343 now, is that tenants and owners, or that's not just
Yes.
owners, right?
Tenants and owners.
So that's a combination.
Well, it'll be properties receiving utility bills.
Okay. All right. Before I let council get into discussion with you, I do want to take some public testimony on this. I do know we've received an email, Gary, you handed out
Yes.
just right before the meeting from Susan and Sean Wilson.
Susan asked that I pass that out to council or make you aware of it in case you didn't get the email yourself.
Okay.
It's because she wanted to be here tonight, but she was unable to make it.
Okay. And just for the record, for those her and her husband were opposed to this. With that being said, if, I will take testimony from anybody on the property owner tenant utility billing agreement. Those that would like to give us testimony, please come up. We'll give you 3 minutes and you can tell us what's on your mind. State your name when you come. Come on up, Dan. I know you're going to want to do it, so you might as well lead there.
Council members, Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. 3 minutes is going to be tough, but I'll just
go ahead and
I'll just
announce
get
it.
some things in, and then you can, if you got questions afterwards, you can ask
Hey,
afterwards.
Dan, I know who you are, but you better announce to everyone else who you are.
So my name is Dan Schoenberg. I'm co-owner of Plus Properties here in Moscow. I live here in Latah County, just outside of the Moscow city limits. I've been a business owner here in Plus Properties for 15, 16 years now. I'd like to start by just thanking some city staff. I sent in a fairly lengthy email. I think all of council members received that, looking at the policy with a number of recommendations. And after some conversations on Friday afternoon, I think there was a lot of changes to that policy, the original policy that was presented at the committee meeting. I appreciate their responsiveness, and I apologize to those that had to stay late Friday to incorporate them. I think looking at that, most everything I had recommended was included, I think with an exception of a single item. So just to give you some perspective, well, first I'm going to start with a quick little story this year. This year, our normal process of uncollected bills from the city that we pay for, I don't think in the past 15 years the city's paid for any tenant bill at the city of Moscow. The owner we've always followed the intent of the city code. We receive those bills and pay those bills primarily out of the security deposit funds after the funds at the city have been applied. And in 2019, we paid for about $1,400 of those bills. We have collected from the tenants all but about $300 of that $1,400. I'd like to get into 2020, but I don't have time for that. That's a whole different realm in terms of owners. But one example in the story I'll tell you is we have a tenant who had been a tenant of ours for over 20 years, living at the same property. Long-term member of the community, aged, her health declined, went through 5 months of hospice, couldn't pay rent, couldn't pay water, sewer, garbage. In that case, and there was over a $500 bill due at the end. In that case, we actually, I didn't even pass it on to the owner. Plus Properties paid that bill. It was our honor. She was our tenant for 21 years. The thing I'm most disappointed is kind of the presentation that happened in the paper. Now, I may be a little sensitive because I think it painted a bad picture of tenants and landlords, and I don't think that's right. As in, they don't pay their bills. And that's not what occurs. And if we look at the $10,250 that's estimated for uncollectible bills on average for a given year, we've got to put it in perspective. The city of Moscow collects $20.73 million annually. As a business, I wish I had that low of a uncollectible rate. And the utility is a business, and you can't expect not to have some losses. I've been on every water, sewer, garbage commission since they established them in this community. And I know that, as an example, built into the foundation of the system is about $270,000 of annual losses for unbilled accounts, unbillable accounts, water leakage and losses. So we all pay for that $273,000 The 10,250 doesn't seem like a large number when you compare it in perspective to everything else. But I want to separate the finances and the perspective of finances from function. We've honored the city code. We collect those bills, we pay those bills, and in a large majority, the owner never gets stuck with the bill. You just give time for the tenants to pay. Generally speaking, with the changes, I'm in support of the changes that are here. I think it's good for the community, it's good for the property managers, as I understand how this process occurs. And there was a comment or two about shut-off in the presentation, that those would go away. I don't see those going away at all. That's still going to be the same process. If the tenant falls behind a certain amount, and if they haven't made arrangements with the city, then the shut-off should occur to protect the owner in this process. So if you're an owner or a property management company, I would expect that the same policies that apply to an owner of a property in town would apply to the tenants equally. It's interesting that it's kind of taken us 32 years to get to the point that we're starting to address state Supreme Court ruling to include into our code or our process so that we can be compliant with the intent of the law that we've always tried to follow. I think it levels the playing field in the community. I don't believe fundamentally it will increase rent rates. I think it's just the opposite. Because if it's over here that you're increasing rent rates, then equally the city of Moscow water, sewer, garbage fees should be going down $10,250 if you don't have that loss. So that would be spread across the community also. I have used my 3 minutes.
Yep, you sure have. I actually gave you a little bit more than that, Dan.
I appreciate it.
But you have such a nice mellow voice, why I figured I'd go ahead. So, just in all fairness, I will give anybody else that wants to come up the same amount of time, so thank you, Dan. Are there others that would like to testify on the tenant utility billing? Okay, well, with that, I'll turn it over to council, but before I think there is a good question, Gary, out of this, the way I understood it, 6,343 people and $10,000 is what that's cost. Well, the $10,000 late, but there's $40,000, so that costs us about $5.50 per person, or per 6,343 if you figured it out from that way. So you may want to address that, or Sarah, whichever.
Yeah, I think your point is that what is the impact to each of the ratepayers?
Yes, and I want to make a comment on an article in the newspaper. Look, at most folks do a wonderful job of paying the rent, paying the utilities, paying for anything that they own in this town. Most people. Unfortunately, we always have that little group that we always have to deal with, and I was in the store business for many, many decades, and 99% of the people were always very honest, and there was 1 to 1.5% that stuck us with bad checks, and thank God for the invention of debit cards, because it put a screeching halt to most of that for us. But most people are honest by nature and do the right thing. So.
Yeah, if I could comment on that too. And again, I think Gary does a great job of reporting for the paper. Certainly that was not the spirit in which our conversation went. It was just like, what is the issue that's trying to be addressed? Why has it taken this long? Dan had a good question about why did it take us from 1989 till now? And part of the issue is that I've seen, this is the third time that the property owner tenant issue has been brought before council. And as Dan will attest to, there has been varying resistance to it. And it's one of those things that I think the council just felt like, well, it's something, maybe it's a cost of doing business, so on and so forth. So now it's one of those things that the process has been, I guess, established for so long, and now is our opportunity to fix it. we thought we'd bring it forward now. So we would have liked to have done it 15 years ago or even 30 years ago, but better late than never.
We did receive an email from another lady earlier, yesterday. I received it. And she was wanting to know why the hurry and why the rush. And so to your point, Gary, I said, well, this has been something that's been in the works for 15 years. We just never got around to it, I guess. Because I was on council back in 2008 when one time it did come before us. To be honest, I really don't recall. Nothing happened, so I don't really remember, other than we did have some folks that weren't happy about it. I remember that end of it.
As I recollect that 2008 situation, and Dan, of course, was involved in that as well, there were representations by the folks that, give us a chance. We will make it right, do the things that Palouse Properties is doing. And most people do, but some who don't. And this is the lingering thing that continues to be an average of about, an impact of about $10,250 per year of uncollectible debt.
Well, and when you have that uncollectible debt, you also have folks that are dealing with trying to track that debt down and working the hours that it takes to do that as well.
Yeah, one other clarification is, no, shutoffs are not going to go away. Even in owner-occupied properties, that if someone is not paying their bill, and by the way, those numbers that were put in the packet that I presented, those are pre-COVID numbers. Those don't include from anything from 2020. So just wanted to make sure that you weren't thinking that this was being imposed because of bills that are owing because of COVID.
Okay, questions for Gary? Art, you had.
Oh, just a couple. Just to clarify, this also applies to commercial accounts, right?
Sarah, I'll punt that to you.
Yes, this applies to all accounts across the board, commercial and residential.
So a question came up about what happens to the owner of a building where the commercial tenant is not paying and has become delinquent.
Well, the process would follow the same as residential. As soon as they become delinquent, a past due notice would be sent to the owner of the building as well as to the commercial tenant. And we would follow the exact same process to the 45-day shutoff and trying to collect from the tenant. But at the time that tenant either shuts down their business or moves to a different location, at that point, with this new process, it would be notifying the owner again of the past due bill at the time the tenant vacates, and within 30 days trying to collect that bill.
So if the tenant's still staying there, for example, the city has the ability to shut off the water to an owner-occupied residence or business, but the same privilege does not extend to the owner of a building whose tenant is not paying up.
In other words,
Can the owner request a shut-off in that case to force rectification of the bill? Because the city does.
yes.
That is not, I believe that's more of a, I don't know that, I think that's more of a legal question on if we can, on the owner's behalf, shut the water off. That has come up a couple of times, and I haven't been one who's been able to answer that.
Mia, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that on. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if we're providing a utility and that utility is being paid for, we will not shut off that water. If an owner calls and says, although my tenant's paying the utility, they're not paying rent, we want you to shut this water off so we can collect rent. My advice to the city would be, no, we cannot do that. There are other avenues for the property owner to pursue to collect the rent.
No,
And
I'm
we're not going to be-
hypothesizing that the tenant is paying the owner rent, they're just not paying the city for the water.
So you're asking?
And so the owner is on the hook, in theory, under the current but not the proposed ordinance. So can the owner say, this debt is piling up here, I want that water shut off to those people because they ain't paying for it?
Yes, I believe that's what would happen, yes.
So the owner can request it in that circumstance.
Yes. Now, whether,
There is a caveat to that, where there would be an issue is if it's a building that has 1 meter that services multiple commercial units.
Yeah, the
1 meter to shut off would shut off all of the units, so we would have to reach a solution.
I'm talking like, there's an example of a commercial building downtown where the owner occupies the top, there's a business on the ground floor, and the owner owns the whole building, and there's 2 water meters, one for the downstairs, one for the upstairs,
Okay.
so.
So I think in that situation, though, if there was a problem with the tenant not paying, I don't think the owner would need to request shut off because the city already will shut off in
Yes.
45 days of non-payment. So that is going to happen, correct?
yes, and then if the bill is delinquent and the tenant hasn't paid it, then the landowner would be responsible for it.
Okay, and one other question is that this applies to water meter by water meter. So if you have a large building like Idaho Hill or something like that where you have many apartments in a building, they're essentially working off of 1 meter, and the owner takes care of that. And so this would apply primarily to issues where you're talking about single-family, duplex, triplex sort of operations. So it doesn't necessarily apply to the tidal flow of students in and out of large apartments at all.
No, for those services that, quadplex and above, then 1 bill goes out. And it's to the management company or the property owner.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
And if I could just follow
Okay.
up on that, I think,
Right.
I suspect that's in response to someone saying, wouldn't this create an incredible amount of work for the city because we'd be having all of these new agreements to have to process, but in that case, all those individual tenants that might turn over every year because they're students, there's just 1 meter. So that's one
One property owner.
agreement with the property owner in the
Exactly.
city, and they don't have to, we don't have to process a new form every time one of their tenants moves.
Yeah, and it's because if you live in a multifamily housing unit, apartment house, something like that, you're paying your rent, your utilities are factored into your rent. So not every apartment has their own meter or anything like that, as you indicated.
Okay. Marie, did you have a question? Okay. And I haven't asked you, your small blocks up there, did you have anything you would like to add?
I had a ton of questions over the last week, and Sarah was really helpful in answering them. A lot of them that came from citizens. But
Okay,
no, I don't have anything to add.
okay, thank you. Sandra?
I do have one question that hasn't been asked yet, and it comes from the email that was given to us tonight. They ask, what about lease agreements that are already in place? How much time will we give landlords to put together a new lease agreement for their tenants?
We haven't established a timeline yet, but I know the email suggested a 2-year phase-in for current leases. Typically, leases have a condition that if the government changes regulations or something extraordinary occurs, then there can be an addendum to the lease or an amendment to the lease. So I've not talked to finance as to what that time would be, but my anticipation would be that it would not be very long.
Gina?
I have a question. What happens if this doesn't get passed tonight? What's the impact?
Well, we will continue to do what we've done, and businesses like Dan's will continue to cover those situations where the tenant hasn't fully paid their bill. But in essence, the secret's never been a secret that under the Haskin case, we may not collect from a landlord legally without this change. So we would continue to incur, I'm presuming, about the same amount of money that we're losing at this point. It'd take about the same amount of time to process. So
So we can implement it a year from now.
we could, but it would take additional, the cut over to the new system, we would have additional processes because of that.
Go ahead, continue.
I have, it's good to hear Mr. Schoenberg's testimony in that I'm glad that he can synthesize the amount of information we've been handed in the last 4 days and make some sense out of it and still be in support of it. I am dismayed at the process with this ordinance. This is not how we make decisions. And the manner in which it was brought to us with very little, if any, notice and that sort of thing. Granted, we did all of that stuff on the side of that one slide, but I'm frustrated by the fact that we have not had the amount of time that we needed as far as being able to get public feedback and that sort of thing, like our normal decision processes are. This is not our shining moment. And I'm just glad that at least I can have some positivity from an affected party in this mess. I guess that my frustration with how this has been presented is almost blocking a good decision for me this evening.
Well, on behalf of staff, I apologize for the late notice with bringing it to you. However, as has been indicated, it has been the law of the city for the past 40 years. We just are implementing it.
Maureen?
Gary, how hard would it be if, to kind of phase it in so that if somebody has a lease that expires in May, it's the new lease that would do it? I guess I'm concerned about somehow somebody has a year-long lease, which is how long residential places usually have, that in the middle of it, it would change that system. So like at the end of the current lease, it would kick over to the new one, and any new one that comes forward has to have this provision in it.
Every lease I've seen, and I've not seen them all, says that the tenant is responsible for utilities. That does not change anything. So I don't know, without having seen the lease, I can't imagine how a lease would prevent this from moving forward. All it's doing is ultimately saying, and if you look in the packet, there is a document in there where the property owner can authorize the tenant to pay the bill.
Right.
Tenant can then pay the bill. Merely the property owner is standing in surety if the tenant fails to pay the bill. So if you're responsible for paying utilities under a standard lease, I can't imagine that it would change that lease. Maybe the city attorney has some perspective on that.
Yeah?
I'm sorry, Gary, what was the question?
Well, the question was, could we phase it in so that leases could have a chance to be changed? And my response was, residential leases, as I have seen them, and I've not seen them all require the tenant to pay their own utilities. So I don't know how it would affect the relationship between the tenant and the property owner.
Yeah, I don't think it would impact it. And in addition, if you look at our directive billing application, the tenant's acknowledging that there may be additional provisions required by the property owner, and that this directive doesn't impact that agreement at all. So it provides some surety to the property owner that the tenant's just acknowledging that whatever agreement they have with the property owner is still a enforceable, solid agreement. But what the city's doing is the property owner is just authorizing the city to directly bill that tenant. So whatever provisions are in place right now between property owner and tenant, that doesn't change because of this process.
Thank you.
And just to reinforce what Gary said, we're not looking to revise the ordinance at all. All we're doing in light of that case is trying to provide a process that allows us all the possible legal remedies we would have to enforce the ordinance that we already have in place.
Thank you, Mia. Brandy, did you have a question?
So this was answered for me at a different time, but just for everyone who might be listening, do we, as a current practice, send the delinquency notice to property owners if a tenant is late on their payment? And do we do that in a timely way?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Sarah, you out there?
Yes, I'm sorry, can you repeat that one?
Do we currently send property owners or management companies delinquency notices when a tenant is late on their utility payment?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We currently send them, as soon as the account goes delinquent, we send it to the tenant, a copy of exactly what we send to the tenant goes to the property owner or the tenancy that's representing the owner.
That was one of the processes that was put in place in 2008.
I got a quick question, and just the thought occurred to me, Sarah. This part of the $31,000 that it costs the city a year to deal with this, is that part of the process that you just said? Is that part of that $31,000? So if somebody's delinquent now, we send a notification to the owner and the
That is
tenant?
part of the process.
So if, we would still have that part of the process, even
Mm-hmm.
if we had this agreement in place. So there's still going to be some kind of a cost factor involved with dealing with it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess by extension, when you were showing us the different, the time and cost breakdowns, some of those time and costs will still exist. Like some people will
Yes.
still need to have the shut-offs and restarted. So I guess we don't have that exact breakdown.
Yeah,
but
we
that-
were just splitting them out as to which ones were property owner / tenant.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And with the expectation that there will be fewer of that happening on the tenant side of things. Once
Exactly.
this is in place.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask Dan a question?
To the chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're gonna have to come up.
Come on up, Dan.
Okay. So, I appreciate what you said. It was very informative about the number of, uncollectible, that you are actually, with your deposits that you are collecting on behalf of owners as a property management company. It sounds like that's part of how you were covering those rare cases where someone is not paying and you've had very little uncollectible at the end of the day. So you're doing something well and you figured out how to incorporate that into your business. Is there anything in this that makes you feel this is going to be a difficult change for you to manage or to incorporate, or that it's going to take some time for you to be ready to do this? Adapt?
Well, that's a lot of questions all in one. So, I don't think there's anything in here that's going to cause us, in terms of our processes at Blues Properties, a lot of change. The one thing that would cause some difficulties is if we have an existing lease with an existing tenant, that tenant's responsible for water, sewer, garbage, and they're just renewing, to be able to collect that signature from the tenant on the, that second page on an existing agreement is going to be difficult. It's difficult enough sometimes getting them to sign the renewal form, even though they want to renew. But that's a timing function. What I would probably do, and I'm just thinking out loud, is I would modify that renewal agreement to include the tenant language on that renewal agreement. And when they sign the renewal agreement, they're going to be agreeing to the city portion. And then the city, I would hope, would accept that change of application, not that change, but that signature from the tenant on that addendum as that signature that would be on that page, as if it were a new tenant. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't anticipate that'll be an issue. Remember, the property owner is the one who's ultimately responsible. We're just trying to create a system by which the tenant, the property owner authorizes the tenant to go ahead and pay the bill and have the bill
Correct.
sent to the tenant. So I don't see why that can't be incorporated, Dan.
There was more questions in that, though.
I think that was, or would there
Other
be,
things.
like, time? Do you feel you have enough time to adapt or you need more time, or?
Yeah, this is the leasing season of the year. In our case, I would not envision needing to make changes to our lease in regards to the new policy because it's already set. Other agencies may need to do that depending upon how their leases are written. That's on a case-by-case basis. The one element that, and it was touched on here that I talked to staff about, was related to requesting shutoffs by an owner, and how that process would potentially occur. I don't believe it should be the right of an owner in this instance to tell the city that they have to shut off the services to a tenant. But I do think it's the right of a property managing owner to request the city to review an account for potential shut-off. And if the city chooses not to turn that off, to be able to justify to me why they would not turn it off. And there could be a great justification. This tenant's behind, they notified us they'd be behind, they're making payments, they're keeping up their installments, and when they get better, or whatever the case may be, they have a plan to make that whole at the end. For any reasonable property manager, that would be a reasonable explanation on rent, let alone water, sewer, garbage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
And I think that was a question, I think maybe you've addressed that a little, Sarah, when this came to us before, that the city has historically worked with people and is pretty flexible with, as long as that person is making an effort and sticking to what they've agreed to. And I think that's in these documents too, that there's this, they just have to kind of stick with the plan and be working towards something. So I assume that would continue?
Yes, that would. And that's something, I mean, we have had several questions come through stating kind of the same thing that was just said, that if a tenant was behind, could it be, the owner's direction to shut the water off? And in the event that the owner is unaware of agreements that maybe the tenant has set in place with the city. And so we've decided that moving forward, we would definitely make sure any owner was aware of payments that maybe a tenant is making on the utilities themselves, so they know what the tenant is doing. And of course, they can provide feedback to us at that time, but we'll continue to try to work with any property owner or any tenant to get the bills paid in full, understanding that sometimes things happen. And paying upfront a total amount sometimes just isn't an option. And so we are trying to continue to be flexible, and that's the plan moving forward.
Sarah, one question that has not come up yet is that how big of a problem is it when somebody just simply leaves town and they do not pay for it, like the last month that they owe or the last 2 months that they owe? Maybe they're not 45 days delinquent, but maybe they're 40 days delinquent and they go ahead and take off, and a week later they're 45 days delinquent and they end up owing 2. Is that what kind of a problem is that? Is that a big portion of this problem?
That is a big portion of this problem, because a lot of times we're completely unaware that a tenant even moved out. We couldn't get a hold of them. Tried to send a delinquent notice, but they were no longer at the residence. No forwarding address. And without having the communication of the property owner or rental agency to know that that tenant has vacated, it kind of just becomes a situation where we're chasing our tails, trying to figure out where to send the bill, who's going to pay it, and what to do next. And so, yeah, that is a lot of staff time spent in that situation.
Okay, so that's the biggest portion of this loss that we're talking about, is somebody that just takes off. It's not the people who are staying here trying to make it work for themselves and for their owners and for our city, correct?
Correct.
I
I
just
mean, probably the other biggest issue would be the ones who move in and right off the bat are immediately delinquent. They aren't working out payment plans. If they do work out payment plans, they don't continue to pay them as they state they would. And then again, ultimately, they end up vacating and we really have nowhere to go with it. So those are probably the two biggest situations that we run into.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
Brandon?
I guess I would say that that's where the property owner has sort of that advantage, because they have a security deposit. And so if now with this adopted, it's pretty clear that when their tenant leaves, I mean, it would make sense for them to hold on to that security deposit until they verify that utilities are paid off. And if they're not, it just comes out of that security deposit rather than the owner's pocket.
Yeah, and can I speak one more actually on that deposit? Something that was brought to my attention, that we are moving forward with our new system that hasn't really been followed in the past due to the current system we have and processes, is a lot of property owners, they would receive delinquent bills when they know, as soon as a tenant becomes delinquent, we send a bill to the property owner. When the tenant's lease is up and they're moving out, because we haven't been able to deal with property owners, we're trying to go after tenants with collections and things like that. Property owners will receive the collection notice, but there hasn't been anything in between. Now, with this new policy and everything that we're setting up, we will make sure when a tenant vacates a property, that final bill will not only be sent to the tenant at the forwarding address we receive, but it'll also be sent to the property owner, knowing that that tenant who vacated has an outstanding bill, and that'll be timely to match the requirement they have of returning that security deposit within 21 days unless it's stated 30. So we're going to make sure we work with property owners to be able to be timely on that collection so that they have some grounds and a security deposit to be able to pull those funds from to pay that bill.
Thanks, Sarah. Makes sense. Gina?
We talked about the sale of a building, and that before the closing, there was a discussion about a lien. Can you catch me up on what that is, please?
Yeah, one of the first drafts we went through, you try to make the system as simple as possible. And
Indeed.
in order to collect on a debt, you need to get a judgment, then the judgment can be reduced to a lien against property that can then be discharged as the property is sold. So we had discussed having a consensual lien by signing that, granting a consensual lien for any utility bills outstanding at the time the property was sold. I believe that it's been amended to say the city may pursue a lien, if I recall right.
Okay.
So soften the language somewhat, but wanted to let
Okay.
Property owners know that this is eventually could be brought against your property if it's not cleared.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, who's next?
I don't know, it seems to me that this is largely catching up and cleaning up an ordinance from 30 years ago that we're finally getting around to, and it does, in a very tiny way, represent fairness to all the ratepayers in the city. And frankly, in my mind, it's something like you go to a restaurant, you don't just stand up and walk out because you don't feel like paying the bill. This is the same thing in my mind on a different scale, where you pick up and you leave, you don't leave outstanding bills. And this is just a way to recoup the money from someone, be it the tenant or the property owner. And with the property owner, generally, there's a damage deposit involved that this money can be taken from. And so when they leave town, you don't get your money back. And so I don't have a problem with this ordinance resolution at all.
Okay.
Hearing nothing else, I'd like to propose approving the attached resolution authorizing the revised process requiring property owners to execute an agreement when applying for city utility services, or and does that include in the resolution the fact that the owners can devolve the responsibility for payment on getting the bills to the tenants?
According to what Dan was talking about?
Yeah, so the tenant just gets the bill and,
Yeah, we will go ahead and adjust the form to reflect that process.
that's the motion.
Okay, that's the motion.
I'll second that.
I can never make a motion straight, you know that.
Okay. There was a motion, Art made a motion to approve the attached resolution authorizing a revised processing and requiring property owners to execute an agreement when applying for city utility services, and it was seconded by Sandra. Does everybody understand the motion? Yeah. I will start with Brandy.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
Ann.
Aye.
Gina.
No.
Sandra.
Aye.
And Art.
Aye.
Okay, that passes 5-1, so there you have it. Thank you, everybody. And this is a resolution, so there's nothing for me to read, so I will move on to the next item, which is item number 5. Thank you very much, Dan, for your testimony and others. Item number 5, request from the Police Ice Rink for Hamilton Funds. Gary Reedner is here to give us the rundown. Gary, you have the podium, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't have a PowerPoint on this. My presentation will be fairly short. Council has seen this issue Committee saw it in mid-December. Council received a presentation from Palouse Ice Rink. I believe Tony was here. On December 21st, presented the proposal where the city council had previously in 2017 and then renewed in 2019, $1 million of Hamilton funds for participation in the construction of an ice rink. The $1 million was to secure participation for the city's youth in programs and ice rink time at that facility. So that facility was going to be located on the grounds of the Latah County Fairgrounds, where they have, everybody's familiar with the ice rink that's out there now. As it turned out, that the opportunity came up for the purchase of the former Northwest River Supplies property on South Main, and Palouse Ice Rink turned their attention to that property and have put together a deal to try and open that as an ice rink. So we were informed about that last fall, toured the facility. Palouse Ice Rink put together a revised business plan and pro forma, and came forward with a proposal which they made on the 21st of December. At that time, Tyler Palmer, I believe, presented the issue that night, and council's direction was to get together with Palouse Ice Rink, develop a resolution or any of the paperwork necessary in order to effectuate the will of the council in granting that $1 million of Hamilton funds. I put together a memorandum that is in the council packet. This is a little bit different deal than the proposal for the fairgrounds property. The fairgrounds property, of course, was a little over a $5 million project. At that time, council indicated that they would commit $1 million of Hamilton funds to act as capstone funding, meaning after all of the other funding was identified in enforceable pledges, cash, or in-kind, enforceable in-kind services, that the city would then distribute its, or allow the $1 million to be billed against by Palouse Ice Rink. The proposal at that time was to make sure that the ice rink got completed and you didn't have a half-constructed ice rink that wasn't doing anybody any good with $1 million of public funds involved. So, when the project changed, so did the business model. The business model became, instead of being located on public property, it's located on private property. There is a mortgage being let and security against the property. So there is a loan being taken out to purchase the property in a note, an owner-carried note, as well as a bank loan. So there will be debt against the property as soon as it is purchased. Secondly, the proposal is it will take an amount of money, $2.5 to $3 million to, and Tony has the more exact numbers, to renovate the facility for an ice rink. So the proposal up front has been that Palouse Ice Rink wants to use the $1 million of Hamilton funds to aid in that renovation and construction. So I'll just go through, as we go through the MOU, we'll talk a little bit about the differences and what we've worked into the Memorandum of Understanding. First of all, the resolution. The resolution reflects much of the same language as the previous resolution in 2019, $1 million of Hamilton funds. The difference here is the Memorandum of Understanding. That was not required in the previous resolution, but the reason it was not is because until that funding was identified and PIR was moving forward with the project, we had not sat down and said, okay, this is what the city needs, the services that need to be provided to the youth of Moscow in order to satisfy Bobby Hamilton's bequest. So we have done so here. We're close enough. PIR wants to move forward fairly quickly with construction, so we had to sit down and work through this thing over the last couple of weeks, and I certainly want to thank PIR for their help in doing that. So we set up a process by which those services would be provided. If you look on page 3 of the memorandum of understanding, city's responsibilities, that once a right of first refusal has been negotiated, once the property has been purchased, and PIR has raised enough money to do the renovation. So you got two things going on here. You've got the purchase of the property and you have the cost of renovation. So in keeping with council's previous resolution, the cost of renovation, the MOU requires that whatever the funding is to renovate, that money must be in hand or must be enforceable before they access the $1 million of Hamilton funds.
Gary, is that just the phase 1? When it says to completion, is that phase 1
Yes.
completion? Okay.
Enough to make the ice rink usable. Okay? And I'm sure Tony will expound on that when it's his turn up here. And then the process, the rest of that paragraph has the process which it is accessed. If you go over to section 3 on page 4, there are 13 provisions by which PIR will work to provide services for the youth of the city. And as you go through there, these are things we are being as reasonable as possible, understanding that until it's open, you don't really know. We don't want to cripple PIR's ability to generate revenue in order to keep the facility open. So we've tried to be as flexible as we can while still obtaining value for the public funds. So going over to section 4, general responsibilities. Again, what PIR is doing, there are 9 sections there. Mainly maintenance type things, keep your 501c3 status, provide those services, so on and so forth, allowing the city to have an ex officio board member in order to keep up and, again, show to the public that we are watching over the public funds and being good stewards of the public fund. Now, this agreement, the MOU, is intended to be in perpetuity. In other words, that PIR will continue to provide these public services as long as they're in operation. But we also understand that in order to, for them to move forward, there needed to be some decreasing reduction of obligation back to the city. So you have a table on page 5, which talks about what happens if PIR goes out of business, so to speak. The property's been purchased, there's a mortgage against it, and there's an ice rink on the property. Now, when we discussed this in the resolution in 2017, 2019, the city was given the opportunity to step up and operate the ice rink so that it could have still some utility to the youth of the city. It was more than just theoretical at that point because the property, the ice rink was located on public property, Latah County, and so it was a little bit different of a discussion, In this case, what we've done is, as we talk about security, talking about, okay, if PIR goes out of business the first year, then according to that section, then the responsibility would be to repay the $1 million or the value of the services. Then it goes down, it's a 15-year amortization, so it goes down $66,666 per year. So at the end of 15 years, if PIR goes out of business, there is no reimbursement back to the city. And reimbursement, I'm talking about having some sort of security against the property. So the city would be in a certain priority or security. If the property were to be sold, then the city would receive some of the proceeds from that sale. Yes, ma'am.
What if it's year 16? Is there still a right of first refusal, or does that go away after 15 years?
This goes away.
It would go away.
Okay.
I believe, Mia.
That's- no.
No, you're right, it does.
No.
I'm sorry, I got
We
confused.
still have the option if we want it.
And one thing I wanted to make sure of is the right of first refusal is just that. It does not require the city to do it. One thing that we were instructed or in discussing with the mayor and council leadership is if the city wanted to operate an ice rink, then they would have operated an ice rink. And it is our hope that PIR operates this for the next 100 years. And so we have no desire to, but what we want to do is provide as many remedies to future councils as possible.
Right. So if in 20 years, there would be no reimbursement coming back, but if Parks and Rec at that time wanted to take it on and PIR didn't want it anymore, they'd have that option. Stay.
Yeah, essentially PIR would quit running the ice
Yeah.
rink.
Okay.
And I would note that that right of first refusal also includes taking it subject to any debts against the property as well. So it isn't like the city's going to waltz in and take it over and there's no obligation.
Well, the city, first things first, city clearly wants a PIR to succeed, period. Everybody up here. I mean, everybody has been associated with the ice rink, and I don't know how many different times we've talked about this. We want them to be a success, period. I mean, that's the whole drill. But what this is all about, folks, is just making sure there's $1 million coming out of a trust, that we're doing our due diligence to do the proper thing. That's what this is about. Isn't that correct?
Yes, and that's what we're trying to do, is we've talked about to PIR. Council's always been very supportive of this. That's not the question. The question is to make sure that we're able to justify the actions of participating for that $1 million. I've been in discussions with NRS Properties attorney and working out how the securities would be recorded and those sorts of things. So that will come after, if this is approved by city council to move forward, then we will move forward with getting those documents prepared as well. Yes.
Where did the 15 years come from?
We had to put some amount of time on it. 15 years seemed reasonable. If you look at the long list of services that PIR will be providing to the youth, it seemed a reasonable amount of money. It could have been 13 years, could have been 20 years, so it just seemed reasonable to go with that amount.
Okay.
Well, Gary, why don't we, I'm going to take some public testimony on this. Why don't we hear from those folks, and then we'll turn it over to council.
Are you going to give PIR the opportunity before you bring the public forward?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yep, I am. And what I want you to do, of course, I know who you are, Tony. I will. You have to identify yourself, sir.
Let's see how good Gary is at audiovisual club.
Usually shows like a Lexan or Lex R.
Yeah, that's what I thought I was going to say, but I think it's... Okay.
There you go.
There you go.
Is that it?
There you are, down on the right.
Bottom right.
Yeah.
It just took it a while to identify.
Is that it?
I mean, everything's blurry up on that screen from where I'm seeing it.
I can't see it either, Tony.
It's Lexar, right?
We promise we don't do this so nobody can read what's being out
There you
there.
go.
216.
That's it.
That's it.
All right, perfect. Oh, no, it's not.
No, don't
Yeah,
worry.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
take
yeah,
some
yeah.
time.
The chance.
Okay,
Got something to come up.
okay.
All right, very good.
Okay, Tony.
All right. My name's Tony Mangini. I'm the vice president for the Police Ice Rink. I believe I've had a chance to present in front of everybody. I missed you last time, Art, but we'll make this one a little bit shorter than last time. I'm going to hit on some highlights of some issues that we talked about that we wanted to focus on. We also have some special guests. We also have our president here tonight in person. On the Zoom meeting, we have our head fundraiser, another member of our fundraising team, and our architect here tonight. And so I really thought the most important thing to tonight's presentation, our presence being here, is to answer questions. This is an important vote for the council, and I want to thank Gary, Mia, and the rest of the city staff, Mayor Lambert, and the rest of the city council for supporting this project. It's been a long time coming. It's exciting to be able to talk about it in terms of actually having an ice rink instead of just the theory of it. I know we do have a facility that we've been very happy with, but it was always a temporary location, and so to be able to have a permanent home is pretty exciting. So a couple things we wanted to talk about. First thing is just kind of talking about, well, how does the Hamilton Fund and the Palouse Ice Rink line up together? We feel it lines up very well. Our 501c3 status really focuses on youth recreation, which is in line with what Hamilton's vision was. Just some highlights, our Youth Hockey Association has about 300 participants per year. I don't know that the 2020 season has gotten to those numbers, mainly because of the COVID situation. But if you compare 300 participants to most sports, I'm going to guess maybe soccer is the only one that could probably hit a number in that range. Considering there's about 2,500 students in the school district, it's a pretty high percentage of students that participate in this particular organization. It hits a wide range of ages, which I think is kind of unique. I'm a baseball guy, and you usually got to get to be about 9 or 10 before you can really play the game of baseball. And so the fact that we can get 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, and it's you know, it's a different type of hockey than it is for the 18-year-olds, but it's just giving them that opportunity to participate, kind of develop the social skills and coordination skills. And so it's been a great program that has evolved over time for this community. You can see that we see a lot of, well, not a lot, 10 to 15% of the participants get some sort of support. And we're proud that, and you're going to see this as a consistent theme as far as our organization. We want the people in this community to be able to use it. I thought a lot about what was Bobby Hamilton's vision why did he pick recreation, particularly youth? And for me, I never had a chance to meet the man. I wish I had. But to me, I'm guessing it's because when you're out on the ball field, on the ice, whatever sport you're participating in, social economic status doesn't really matter. It's about competing. It's about scoring a bucket, hitting a home run, getting a goal. It's about the activity itself. And you can set aside all the other things in life that we have to deal with, who has and who has not. It's just being kids. And so I think if you look at the programs we have, it really aligns with that mentality. A Learn to Skate program we've had for a long time. We usually do about twice a year. We get about 75 participants, about 95% of it's kids. Occasionally you get like a parent that gets involved. And I think we talk a lot about kids, but I hope people understand that it's important that adults are a part of this too. If you think about the reasons why kids play sports or get active, it's usually modeling. It's usually because they saw somebody that got them inspired to do so. When I was a kid, my dad had a couple of baseball trophies in the trophy case, and I knew I wanted to play baseball for no other reason. It's because my dad played. I never got to see him play, but I knew he played because I saw those trophies. And so, having these opportunities as parents to do things with your kids, I think is incredibly valuable. It's going to increase the likelihood they're going to want to try the sport and hopefully make it a lifetime recreational activity for them. And then public skate, it even takes it that much further. I mean, it's great seeing families out on the ice. A couple things we wanted to note, particularly to the Hamilton Fund this last year, we were able to add a couple of daytime slots to our schedule that work really well with the school schedule. Our youth hockey, which predominantly takes most of the slots in the afternoons, was able to take some morning slots, and it freed up a little bit of time for at least a couple days, so we could have some time available after school, which was really nice. And another thing, we're dealing with snow days and vacations, holidays, all these things that happen. The ice rink gives kids stuff to do those days. Typically during a school day, we're pretty light. I mean, we have science on ice, we have different programs, but on a Christmas break, Thanksgiving break, spring break, we make sure to add additional time. It works great for us because it gives our employees and gives our operation something to do. But for the community, it's great for them as well. It gives them a fun activity, burn off some energy, and get out of the house for a little bit. And so, again, it just all lines up with the things that we talk about that are important for kids in this community. A couple of other programs. The Polar Bears is kind of a newer program. I know I've mentioned it in the past, but what's really cool about it is specifically for girls and young women. It's kind of small. It is growing. But one of the things when talking to our rink manager, trying to learn a little bit more about it, is it goes beyond just hockey. It's really trying to help young women develop more leadership skills, talking to them about kind of life beyond school, like going to college, or helping them meeting a mentor. They talked about wanting to, find out what girls are interested in and finding somebody in the community that they can talk to that could be a good role model to help them kind of figure out where they want to go with their lives. So I think it's really a cool thing that they're doing with that program. It's really honestly less about the hockey and more about life and how you can, develop these skills that will make you a better person, a stronger woman as you become an adult. And so I think it's a really cool program that we've seen take off at our rink. We've been involved with the Kids Camp and Adventure Club. I remember my kids were in Adventure Club. I think it was before the ice rink, but that's a good program for just giving them something to do, just recreational opportunities. And then the last one, just winter sports exploration. Every so often we do different sports. Just come try hockey, come try curling. Just giving people a chance to do it for free. It's low risk. It's hard when your friends play something and you don't. How do you get your foot in the door? Because you feel kind of embarrassed. I'm not any good. Why should I? I can't do it. You have a safe environment in these kind of settings where you can just try it and see if you like it. And then that can hopefully help people figure out what fits for them. And there's such a diverse range of things that we have that we offer. It's so much more than what a lot of facilities can do, because it's not just one thing. I'm a baseball guy. I love the ball fields. But if you're not playing baseball or softball, it's hard. I mean, what else can you do? They do play soccer. I've seen them play lacrosse. But you pretty much play a sport at that field. At an ice rink, if you go to a public skate, you don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to be coming to play a game. You just skate in a circle. But it's about having fun. It's about socializing. It's about just engaging with your friends, your family, and experiencing time together. And laughing as, family members fall to the ice and all that. But it's all in good fun. So, it just adds to who we are and what we're able to do for this community. The other part that we wanted to talk about is a little bit more about financing. So as Gary mentioned, that there's a couple of key loans that we're involved with. A little more details. We're working with Zion's Bank. It's a 25-year note. It's a USDA-backed loan. And it's going to start out as a construction loan, convert to a permanent note as soon as construction is completed. Talking to the loan officer, he's got it set up for originally it's going to be a 12-month period, but if the construction finishes faster than that, he can switch it over. And then it's a 4% interest rate. It's locked in for 5 years, and then every 5th year it can be readjusted based on the 5-year treasury rate. So right now, obviously, interest rates are incredibly low, so that's to our advantage. It could change in the future, but it gives us a 5-year period to get debt paid down. So if in the event that interest rates do come up, we can adjust for that to mitigate our total costs. And then there's the Parks loan. So that's with the sellers of the property. They're doing a 10-year interest-only note with a balloon at the end of the term. And one thing I thought was important to note about it is the interest rate is 4.5%. When NRS did the ESOP transaction, I learned a lot about secured debt versus unsecured debt. And typically with unsecured debt, you would expect to see a surcharge between 2 and 4 percentage points to account for the risk factor, because you're basically unsecured. And so we would normally expect a loan like this to carry an interest rate of 6 to 8%, and the Parks were generous enough to negotiate to 4.5%. So there is some actual savings there because they're willing to have some flexibility on that point. All right, so yeah, Gary did talk about phase 1, phase 2. So phase 1 basically satisfies all the requirements to open our doors, including a paved parking lot. I was expecting a little more reaction than that, but anybody that's been to any of the Board of Adjustment meetings with me knows how important that particular issue is. So the numbers I got came this morning, and Corey Trapp, who's our architect, is on as a Zoom caller, so he can talk more detail about what Phase 1, Phase 2 means. But in general, Phase 1 is what does it take to open our doors, meet city code, get an occupancy permit. So that includes the ice surface, having enough toilets, basic amenities. And then we do have aspirations to do more to the project, finish the locker rooms. I mean, ideally, we'd like to be able to host tournaments. We want to be able to do some things with this facility we haven't been able to do with the current one. And so the total bill to do that is just about 3.14 million in total. Right now, we have about 600 grand in cash that is collected, 500 grand in pledges. The loan with Zion's Bank is a $1.455 million loan. $1 million of it would go to the seller, leaving the $455,000 for construction costs. And then assuming that the Hamilton funds is made available, we would have 2.555 available, which is about 90 grand. I think it's about 90 grand more than what is needed to do Phase 1. We're still actively fundraising. Christina Randall and Stephen Warner are both on as Zoom members of this, and they can talk more about what we have going on that part of things. But we're very happy with how things have turned out so far. Since we initially announced in the beginning of November, it was recently announced the large support we got from ICCU. We have some other larger donations that we're looking forward to announcing here soon. I had an experience about 3 weeks ago. I sat with somebody who was interested in learning about the ice rink and walked away with a $25,000 check. And so it's the generosity and the support that this community has for it is just always, it's humbling and amazing. And I have no reason to believe that's going to change anytime soon. So I'm really excited to be able to say we're really, I mean, we feel comfortable with being able to deliver Phase 1 this year. I'd love to be able to do Phase 2 and with grant season kind of getting rolling and the relationships that we have built up so far and the more positive news that we can put out into the community, I think our team's going to be able to get us to where we need to be. So just wrapping up, we believe we can get this ice rink in if we can get this MOU approved and continue that process. The ice rink is going to continue to do fundraising and work towards getting everything done, including Phase 2. And our goal goes beyond that. We'd like to get that principal paid down. We realize we're a 501c3. Carrying a heavy debt load is not ideal. This is really a matter of necessity. This is really the reason why the other project could never succeed is because we never had an asset. We never had anything we could leverage for a loan. And so we were always about $3 million short from ever really being able to deliver on it. And unless there was just going to be a benefactor with a big checkbook that was going to cover that gap, it was just a bridge too far. And so now here we have this.
I don't know how many different times I've talked to both Mark and Tony, so.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lambert. I'm Mark McGuire, Moscow resident, and I'm also the president of the Blues Ice Rink. And I've been an active user as well as supporter of all youth activities at the rink since it opened. And I'll just reinforce what Tony said. We see the opportunity is close, and we're pushing hard as a volunteer organization to really address all the complexities that are there when it comes to being a nonprofit with volunteers and trying to get some loans. And we certainly have some wonderful benefactors that are stepping up in this situation in Bill and Donna Parks. And we look forward to inviting you all to an open skate as soon as possible. And October, November 2021 is a great timeline if we can do it. We do have a contractor set and ready to mobilize as soon as we take ownership of the property. So, while Tony is correct that construction never quite follows what you plan, we do think that we can pull this off so that by the end of 2021, we will have a functional ice rink with indoor bathrooms and a paved parking
In a
lot.
paved parking lot. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. And that, I'll share one point of clarification on the paved parking lot. I was chair of Board of Adjustments one of the times when the CUP came up on that. And of course, I was on planning and zoning at that time that we had to deal with it in the parking lot every single time. I don't know how many times I heard it, but a number of different times on both Board of Adjustments and planning and zoning, so. Are there others in the room that would like to come up?
Mr.
and
Mayor?
Speak on
I think
the,
someone on Zoom would like to speak. I think you can only see one person at a time, which is me, but I think if he unmutes himself. he
okay,
should.
well, just hang on a second, and I'll recognize somebody else on there. I'm checking to see if somebody in the room here in council chambers would like to speak before I go to anybody on Zoom. Nobody else is coming up, so who's on Zoom that would like to speak to us? Go ahead.
Hi, Mayor Lambert. My name is Stefan Werner, and I'm on the fundraising committee. They kind of dragged me into it. Is it okay for me to speak?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So I was reminded of a fun fact, and that is that Tony is a baseball guy, and I'm a soccer guy, right? All my kids played soccer, and I was a manager for a soccer team for Moscow United for a couple of years, and they're trying to make me a ref for some reason. But so I didn't grow up with hockey, and the reason I'm associated somehow with hockey is because of my son, who was crying like, when he was 5, was crying mercilessly because he was so cold on the ice one day, and then his friend convinced him to play hockey, and since then he's not wanting to leave the ice anymore. And so he's been playing for about 10 years here, and then for a while for the Hockey Academy up in Coeur d'Alene. And I don't have any self-interest in this rink because he's graduating high school now and he won't actually benefit from the rink. But I've seen what good it does for kids. And I've been with soccer, my whole life. Growing up in Germany, I played soccer and as a manager here with my kids. But the cohesion that the teams have on the hockey side is on a different level because they have to travel so far, usually for their tournaments, up into Canada, Idaho Falls, Boise, those kind of places for a lot of them. And so they really spend a lot of time together, and the bonding that they do as kids is just really amazing. And having a better facility or a real full-size facility here in Moscow would be a great benefit for kids in the teenage years, because the rink is just too small for somebody who can skate fast, and after about 2 seconds they're running out of room in the old rink. But the new rink will be regulation size, so it'll be fun to see teenagers play real hockey here in a home rink and not have to drive to Cheney to do that, or to Spokane or to Coeur d'Alene. So I'm all in favor for this, even though my main sport is soccer. But I also know that soccer on the Palouse is a difficult proposition. I mean, the number of days that soccer was canceled because the fields were too wet in April, or even into May. Soccer really is a summer sport into the fall here, and you can't really play soccer in the winter time. And hockey is one of those things that you can actually do from September to May, and it's a great way to get people out there or into the rink during a time when there's not many other opportunities for them with other sports. I mean, baseball is dormant during that time. At least on the fringe, there are going to be some baseball games, but in the deep winter, there's nothing other than maybe basketball, volleyball, and hockey. And it's a great activity. And even my daughters, who are not hockey players, like to go to the rink and just skate, with their friends every now and then, and have dates. I don't know how many relationships were founded on the ice there. Anyway, so I'm fully supportive. That's why I joined kind of the fundraising committee, and that's pretty much all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Stevens.
Sure.
Okay, council, how'd you like to take this? Questions asked or conversations amongst yourself? Maureen?
Tony, or somebody can answer. What is the skating season? When is it open for?
Come on up here to the podium. I don't care. Mark, you can come up. Both you guys can come up, Mark and Tony. And why don't you just come on up here and.
Kind of a couple questions, but the first one is, what is the skating season?
So when you say skating season, are you talking like like specific
Hockey?
to hockey, or are you talking just skating in general?
I'm talking about skating in general.
Well, it depends on where you live. I mean, some places.
No,
in
I mean
your-
here.
In
But here,
here,
how do you
our normal
envision-
season right now is about mid-October to about mid-March, mid to the end of March. Normal years, we'd probably end at the end of March. This year, we're actually going to end about 2 weeks early because of COVID. But that's what we've been using as a normal season.
And do you have a vision of what you'd use it for during the off-season?
Well, some of that's going to depend. One of the things that we're deciding is what we do, whether we put concrete over the top of the ice surface. A less expensive alternative is sand. The problem is if we do the sand, then it kind of limits what we can do with that space. I mean, it really can only be used for ice. I don't know, I'd have to, and Corey Trapp's there, he maybe could answer the question, how much of a price differential there is. You know, hopefully we can do the concrete, because then it would give us some options, maybe, in the past, we've done roller skating, we've had soccer, we've had, inline, roller hockey. So it's certainly having a concrete surface would give us more options, and maybe that's something that's maybe phase 3, you know, where we could do that down the road. You know, the trick is finding that balance so that, because I talked to the rink manager today, you know, what should the dates look like? She had heard people were expecting us to be open 9 months out of the year. I think anybody that's lived in this town for any length of time, we tend as a community to shift from indoors to outdoors around March, April, May, depending on when the weather shifts. And so there's definitely a drop even in our activity around that time period, depending on what the weather looks like. If the weather's bad, people want to keep skating. If it gets nice and sunny outside and spring comes early, then people transition to other activities. So what we don't want to be in a situation where we're staying open for the sake of staying open and then create this financial hardship, because when the weather's warm, that's the most expensive time for us to
Sure.
operate. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Here you go, Bill.
Art, science on ice you didn't mention that as one of the benefits of the rink. Do you anticipate that continuing?
So at this point, science on ice is a regular component of what occurs at the ice rink. I mean, it is a valued program for fifth graders around the area that come in and learn about the physics, learn about centrifugal force, et cetera. Whether or not it stays called science on ice is still maybe uncertain, because it may evolve into other aspects of understanding fluids and such. So, but there will be an educational component at the ice rink forever, as far as as I'm president, because I think it's a critical piece of not only introducing kids to the ice, but to understand why you can skate fast, why you can slide on ice, and such. So I think it's a tremendously valued educational piece.
Brandy.
Do you have any concerns with any of the things that the city is asking of you in that section 3 about the public skate time, for example, and those other things? I mean, are these all things that you feel can work into your business plan and fit?
We went through a whole vetting process with city staff, and so what you're seeing is not the first draft. So we both sides had their own perspectives, and we were able, I think, to meet in the middle where we could address kind of the concerns and what is the spirit of the Hamilton Fund and the city's obligation to due diligence, and then for us trying to provide what we've been providing to this community and still being financially solvent, taking on all these other responsibilities. And so I think we found a good balance. I mean, it's a good understanding. I think it's kind of a learning process as you negotiate something. You know what you know. And so I felt like we, both sides were able to give where we needed to and make it work for both sides.
Tony, I wanted to mention something. You talked about you had never met Bobby Hamilton, and neither have I, although I do know people that knew him quite well. And he was a guy that grew up during the Depression, dirt poor, and had nothing but work on his hands from the time he was a kid until his retired life. And he wanted, the reason, the way I understand it, that he set this trust up was he wanted kids to be able to do things that he could never do. Opportunities for kids, and I thought that was an amazing story, and I've never forgot that, but that's how I understand it. And like I said, I've never met the man, but I had those that have told me that that's how that trust came about. So I just wanted to share that with
Well,
everybody.
and I think what you've done collaboratively together with a lot of these things is assure that this is accessible regardless of ability to pay, and that you have figured out from a financial standpoint, of course, everything can't be free as a nonprofit, but balancing to assure that it is accessible to the youth as Bobby Hamilton wanted it to be.
Gina?
So only part of that building is going to be ice, right? And I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this question, but I'm just throw it out there and then they can tell me no afterwards. Can you tell me about what the other space is going to be used for? There's some additional space.
Right. So the property, the building was built in 3 phases. There were 10,000 square feet initially built in 83, right off the highway, 10,000 square feet, and then 24,000 square feet. The 24,000 square feet will have the ice rink and most of this stuff adjacent to the ice rink. The middle 10,000 square feet will be additional locker room space, the main lobby, skate rental, concession, all that stuff. The 10,000 right off of the highway will actually be leased to a tenant. We have a letter of intent. We're not quite ready to make it public who the party is, but we feel really good about the relationship. It's a Monday through Friday business, which really works very well for us because when we're hosting tournaments, they're not in need of their parking lot. Which just gives us that much more extra parking on weekends when we typically have the most demand for our facility. So we're trying to be smart in how we use the property. The advantage of this scenario is it gives us some cash flow to help offset some of the interest expense, because we realize debt's not free. We talk about free. Yeah, debt isn't either. And so being able to have some rental income, it makes that property generate something to offset some of those costs.
Oh, yeah, you have to have cash flow coming in.
It's true.
Corey, can you hear me?
He might have his mic on mute.
There he goes.
Yeah, yes, I can hear you.
Hey, Corey, could you talk a little bit about, and Mary Lambert, I hope it's okay if I ask a question. Corey, could you talk a little bit about your experience? You were worked on the Coeur d'Alene ice rink. You've got a little bit of experience with ice rinks, but kind of how working with us as a nonprofit, trying to help us reach our goals, but trying to do it in the best cost-efficient way possible?
Now, hang on a second. Now, Corey, you're an engineer, is that correct?
I'm an architect.
Architect, okay. I just wanted to get that straight so we knew exactly what your title was and what you do. Okay, go ahead.
Right. I'm with Longwell Trap Architects. We helped Cairo when they're in Coeur d'Alene, probably 10, 15 years ago now, probably. We redid their ice rink after it collapsed. So we do have some experience working with the ice rinks. And this is a really unique challenge. We have 9 columns we have to take out of that building to put the ice sheet in, unless you want to skate around columns. But there was a question about the cost of the concrete. The concrete floor could be $80,000 to $90,000, so that's a big chunk. We're making value judgments all the time. Working with the committee and the different user groups to talk about what can we put in this cost effectively to use the money as wisely as we can and get the most bang for the buck on designing the building. So we're working through several of those things to try and make it as cost effective as we can.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Corey.
I have one more question, and that is, I asked it the last time, and I just want to have it affirmed again, mainly because the architect is here too, is that it's my understanding that regulation skating or hockey is 185 to 200 feet. And so I just want to make sure that we're not building and putting a bunch of money into a skating rink that in fact will not attract other teams to come and play here. Because if we really want to do this in terms of tournaments, and we want to do it, I want to make sure that we don't, that we can have that need met.
USA Hockey approves this regulation size, and it's anywhere from about 180 in length and 85 in width. And our facility, as it's currently designed, is 85 in width, so regulation width, and it'd be 185 in length. We surveyed most of the rinks that are in the greater area, and while the optimum that USA Hockey would like it to be is 200 in length, almost very few of them actually met that 200. Most of them were in the 180 to 185, 190 range. So we feel that we're comfortable. We fit with what's in the area. And to put it simply, we just could not afford to kick out a wall and extend it to 200 feet. So the reality is we're a little shorter than the 200, but it's still a full-size regulation rink that will be used for a multitude of different activities.
And it's comparable to most of them around here.
It's very comparable.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Gina?
I wish I could have that thing. Remember on Gilligan's Island when they did this and they would go like a flashback? I want us all to have a moment of thinking about where you were, how many years ago when we first started talking about this, and how far you've come and where we're standing right now. I just have to commend your endurance, but also your ability to act like a business and pivot when you need to and make do and recognize opportunities. And I'm just very, very proud of you. And I was just a cheerleader, but darn it, this is going to be a good thing. So having said that, Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, go right
please,
for it.
that, do I have to say to review the draft of it too, or can we just approve the MOU?
Just say approval of the,
Okay, I move that we approve this MOU and resolution stating conditions of approval for the Palouse Ice Rink's request for city participation of $1 million of Hamilton funds to assist in construction of the ice rink.
Second.
okay, we've got a motion by Gina and a second by Brandy to approve Palouse Ice Rink's request for the city participation of $1 million of Hamilton funds to assist in the construction of the ice rink and approve the memorandum of understanding and resolution, correct?
Yes, sir.
We all good with that?
Can I make another comment before we vote?
If you want.
I do, because I really loved also what you said about this. This is primarily for youth, and that's what we're using those funds for. And that is who primarily uses the rink. You mentioned adults, though, and you know how many athletic activities can we do around here as adults with our young kids? Not many. I mean, you're not out there on the baseball field with them or on the soccer field. You're spectating. But there are so many different things that happen in the rink where adults and their kids can be out there together at the same time, which is very unique for any kind of exercise or facility that we have here. And you also mentioned it's a can be a lifelong sport. And I played my first hockey game when I was 40, so I can attest to that. And there is that adult league. I know the adults will be pushed to the least desirable times because this is primarily for youth, but it really has a lot of other tentacles of benefit. So just wanted to throw that up there.
I will
Pretty
say
unique.
that with respect to curling, that in fact, they had a whole lot, I did curling for several years, and the answer was, there was an array of people curling. There were college students all the way up to old people. And so, I just have to say, I appreciate this band of it. But I was really appreciated all the information in terms of making sure that you all, the rink, takes care of kids who have no money. It's a real big issue. And so I appreciated seeing those statistics and figuring out, and I'm sure you must have some mathematical equation in terms of how to make that clear, but I appreciated that information.
Okay, we have a motion.
Bill?
It's been
You got something you want
seconded.
to say,
Yes, I
too?
haven't had a thing to say yet. But as everybody knows, I've been a long-term supporter of this, and of course, anytime you're dealing with monies of this magnitude, there's always risk involved. But you made some very good points about having this property providing a tangible asset to obtain the loans to finish it off was, in my mind, very well phrased. And the fact that there's education involved as well as recreation is important to me. And it wasn't really brought up, but there are also other benefits to the city beyond the recreational aspect of this in terms of bringing in people for tournaments and things like that, which increase hotel stays, bring in money into the community, extend tourism season to Moscow into the winter, where usually there isn't much. And so those overcome my fear of risk here, and I think the benefits outweigh that risk in my mind.
Well,
I wanted to say that, Bill.
Okay, well, now that anybody else want to speak before okay. So,
Well done.
We're good.
Tony and Mark, look I will say this, I doubt if I ever put on a pair of ice skates, but I may give curling a shot, how's that? And I'm happy that you guys don't have to come before us again, because I don't know how many meetings I've sat in between Planning and Zoning Board of Adjustments and on this council as a city councilor and a mayor. So good job, you guys have been working for years on this. I'll start the roll with you, Art.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Ann.
Aye.
Brandy.
Aye.
And Maureen.
Aye.
Okay, good going. Sign a memorandum of understanding, and we'll get going here, fellas. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
With that, we'll go on to item number 6, which is our monthly COVID-19 report. Gary Reedner will talk to us about numbers.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is, as you said, our monthly report on review of the metrics that council adopted regarding the social distancing or face covering order. So Resolution 2020-27 indicated what those metrics would be. And just reviewing that again, Latah County must be in the minimal risk category for all 3 factors below for 3 consecutive weeks, according to the regional data tool for determining health alert levels adopted by Public Health Idaho North Central District. Those factors are, based on a 7-day moving average, new daily cases must be less than 1 case per 10,000 population. For Latah County, that would be approximately, well, it would be 4 or fewer per day cases. And then based on a 7-day moving average, the number of confirmed COVID-19 hospital admissions district-wide must be in the range of 0 to 5. And lastly, test results must be reported in 1 to 4 days. At our last report in January, we did not make A or B. C, of course, we are in the green on. So we, as far as the resolution goes, Governor Little must also place us in stage 4 of the Idaho Rebounds Plan. And then if those, the previous slide that, this previous slide, number 1 and number 2, if both of those are in the green, then we go right down the list and look at recommendations of public health. Then we look at recommendations from our institutional partners and then review COVID-19 conditions in Whitman County. So this is what we've got. I'm sorry it's not more clear, but as you can see, this is the COVID-19 incidence. So we're seeing down quite a bit and then a little bit of a resurgence, but we're seeing numbers reduce. So this is what's going on. February 1st, 2021, February 8th, these are different weeks, and February 15th. So as you can see, February 1st in the red on average cases per week, in the green on test results, and in the red for regional hospitalizations. Same February 8th. The good news is February 15th, we are still in the red on average cases per week, but we are in the green on regional hospitalizations and average day for test results. So that's a good sign. We're 2 for 3, so progress is being made. Secondly, in the 2 previous weeks, we were in stage 2 of Idaho rebound. We have since been upgraded to stage 3 by the governor. So that's good. We aren't quite to stage 4, but we're getting closer. And then because we haven't had to seek new recommendations, we use the same recommendations from these different institutional partners, and that is to maintain the amended public health emergency order. So looking at Whitman County, and Whitman County is, as you know, has a little bit different data gathering, but this is what we have. They are in the red for new cases and in the green for hospitalizations. So that's where we are. We're not to the point where we've met the metrics, but we're applying those on a weekly basis, and those are the results. So I'd stand for any questions.
We're inching along, and that's what we want to see. And, you know, we've told all of our citizens that we had these matrices in place, and so that's kind of an exciting thing to watch it. Vaccines are being rolled out for those that want to take it, and I figure in the next few months, things are looking a lot brighter, and days are getting longer, although we do have snow out, that we've been hammered with the last couple of days, but I figure in a few weeks that'll be gone. But anyway, it's good news coming forward.
So don't we have to do a little division when it comes to the Whitman County data, because theirs is like 250-something per 100,000? Couldn't we just, for the purposes of our analyses, just move the decimal points?
Quite likely, but we don't have to get that because we aren't had the 3 weeks yet. So we've been treating it as, we report it as it is reported out in Whitman County. We take it right off their website. But certainly we could interpret that.
Because it makes it easier to compare them.
Sure.
I kind of have that similar question with the hospitalizations in Whitman County. I know so far, I mean, these other things haven't been met, but on the, on our website, it talks about the 7-day average of hospitalizations as that's what we're looking at over here, but what it's actually reporting is cumulative hospitalizations there. Can we get that information? Do we not have it? Is it too difficult? Because maybe we just shouldn't, right now it's a mismatch. It says 7 days, but the numbers are actually cumulative.
We take the cumulative numbers and subtract from the previous week is how we've been doing it.
Okay, so can you put that up again, that last one? So if the difference 1 week to the next, there's just 4 more, then that week is 4. Is that right?
That's what it sounded like.
Yeah. But maybe we should put that on the website. I don't know. Or just explain it, because that's been misunderstood by some people.
There we go.
Okay, so then these are 3 consecutive weeks, and there was 3 cases and then 1 hospitalization.
That's my understanding, yes.
Do we want to put those numbers, 3 and 1, rather than the cumulative? Or maybe just take a look at how it reads and see if that
I
seems
get
clear.
nervous in interpreting numbers from other jurisdictions, and
Yeah.
but I mean, we could certainly do that. I just don't want to misrepresent them.
Well, then maybe if we just change the website so that it says total hospitalizations instead of 7-day, because I think right now it does say the 7-day
Okay.
average. Just change it to total hospitalizations.
Well, their numbers have been trending better as well.
Yes.
I mean, so,
In the right direction, but
Yeah.
I appreciate that we aren't comparing apples to apples.
anyway,
Okay, we'll take a look.
we're moving forward. Any other questions for Gary?
No, but I have one thing from the last item that I want to ask before we leave, so I'll just let you
From the
decide
last
when I can do
item.
that. From the ice rink, for a quick question for Mia, but I'm afraid if I don't do it until later, it could be problematic.
Well, go ahead and ask her now then.
On that one part where it does say,
Oh, yeah.
that, let's see, hang on, page 46. It's the whereas.
I closed my computer up, so.
Okay,
you have
that's
to
okay.
give me- yeah.
No, it's the first city general responsibilities where it says, PIR has raised the necessary amount of funding to fully construct said ice skating facility to completion. Should we change that to phase one? I'm just not sure if that could be a problem at some point, if someone said it's not to completion. Because maybe completion could be phase two. Should it specify phase one, just to be a little careful?
I think within the actual order itself, the part that details out what the responsibilities are, I think it does specify phase one.
Okay.
Yeah, in the MOU itself, it
Yeah.
states it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, before I ask for adjournment, I want one thing, now that we're in stage 3 and we can have counselors in here, the next council meeting and going forward, we'll be calling on for reports from committees and different things. We haven't done that for quite some time, so that'll be kind of a nice change.
Do you
So
want
we
them from the last time we gave?
Nope, I want you to start, Arthur. Nope, this is like in the last few weeks before the meeting, how's that?
Okay,
You
that's
don't
good.
need to go back to last summer, okay?
I've got a scroll this
No,
long.
no, we'll do it recent, how about something that would happen in 21? Nothing in
that's
20, okay? With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
All right.
Okay, we are adjourned at 9:02. Thank you, everybody.